I was sitting in my old Ford engine off cold air, leaking through a cracked window, staring straight into the living room of my own damn house. Through the binoculars, I could see every movement, every shadow, every gesture happening behind those familiar curtains. That's my house. Those are my lights. And those two people walking around in there, that's my son and his wife. And tonight, I'm spying on them. Before I go on, if you're listening to this right now, do me a favor. Drop your name in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. And hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this story only gets darker from here. Now back to the moment my life split clean in two. I'd been sitting there for almost an hour when Loretta Coleman, my 78-year-old neighbor, with sharper eyes than any cop I ever knew, leaned into my truck earlier that night and whispered the words that still haven't left me. Around midnight, you're gonna see who your family really is, Ben. And God help me. I believed her. Because sitting there in the dark watching Jason's silhouette pass across my living room wall, like he owned the place, I felt something I hadn't felt since my years with the IRS fraud division. Fear. Not the kind that sends you running. The kind that freezes your bones and curls tight behind your ribs. But this story didn't begin in that truck. It began 3 days earlier, on a hot Tuesday morning, when I walked into my own home office and felt the world shift under my feet. I'd just come back from my morning jog, nothing fancy, just 2 easy miles around the neighborhood, like I've done for years, trying to keep this 60-year-old heart beating after the minor heart attack I had 2 summers ago. Sweat still cooling on my neck, I pushed open the door to my study, reaching for the light switch. My hand froze. Nothing was broken, nothing dramatic. But something was wrong. You live in the same house for 25 years. You learn the way the shadows fall across your walls at different times of day. You know exactly how far back you push your chair, which way your files lean, where your pens sit. And in that room, everything was almost right. Almost is where nightmares begin. The stack of financial files on my desk, retirement accounts, property tax records, the deed to the house, I always keep it aligned dead center. Now it's sat shifted maybe 2 inches left. My chair was angled slightly away from the desk instead of pulled straight in. The rug under the chair had a new crease, like someone heavier than me had dragged their feet. But the thing that made my fingertips go cold was the filing cabinet. Top drawer. Left side. The one with the documents no one touches. A silver scratch ran along the lock, fresh, sharp, unmistakable. Someone had tried to open it. Someone who didn't know what they were doing. I twisted the lock open, my key still worked, and pulled the drawer out. Everything was there, but nothing was where I left it. Insurance files mixed with the property appraisal. IRA statements under old tax returns. Investment summaries I hadn't looked at in months, sitting right on top. It looked like someone had gone through the drawer slowly, carefully, then tried to put it back together the way they thought it was. Close, but not close enough. For a second, a humiliating thought crossed my mind. Maybe I moved it myself. Maybe I forgot. But the investigator in me, the one who spent 30 years catching people who thought they were too clever to be caught, shut that down instantly. My memory isn't perfect, but it damn sure isn't so bad. I'd forget reorganizing my own life savings. I stood there staring at those disordered papers when a realization as sharp as a knife pressed against my throat. Whoever went through my documents knew what they were looking for. And they were looking for something worth stealing. By the time dinner rolled around, I'd convinced myself there had to be some mistake. Maybe I bumped the drawer the day before. Maybe Jason had been searching for a tax form and didn't tell me. Maybe Madison vacuumed and nudged something. But the moment I sat down at the dinner table, my usual spot, head of the tablecloth napkin, folded the same way my late wife used to do it, My doubts shattered. I cut into my meatloaf, trying to calm the buzzing in my chest when Jason cleared his throat. "Dad," he said casually, "you ever think about updating your will? I mean, just to stay organized?" The fork stopped in my hand. I didn't look at him right away. I looked at the wall behind him, the same wall where my wife's photo hangs. I remembered her soft warning years ago that Jason had a taste for shortcuts. I never wanted to believe it. I lifted my eyes slowly. Jason's smile twitched at the corners, too nervous to be casual. Then Madison joined in, voice warm like honey, but sharp underneath. "Bin, have you ever thought about assigning a power of attorney, just in case something happens to you? It would protect everyone." There it was. Those words, so gentle, so rehearsed. Power of attorney. My throat tightened. The room felt too warm. And behind their calm faces I saw something I'd spent decades identifying in defendants and tax cheats. Intention. My son. My daughter-in-law. Talking about my will. My power of attorney. My future incapacity. And suddenly all the scratches, the shifted papers, the misplaced files, snapped into perfect, terrifying alignment. Someone had been in my documents. Someone planning something. And the two people sitting 3 feet from me suddenly didn't look like family. They looked like suspects. I forced myself to smile, to nod, to eat, but inside, something old and sharp in me woke up. When dinner ended, Jason slapped my back like everything was normal. Madison cleared plates. The house hummed with its usual quiet suburban peace. But as I walked back into my study alone, with the faint smell of their cologne and perfume still lingering in the hallway, I knew the truth. That was the night I realized my biggest threat wasn't out there in the world. It was sitting at my own dinner table calling me Dad. I woke up the next morning long before the sun did, 4:52 a.m. Old age, insomnia, sure. But that morning, it felt more like survival instinct. I walked the house the way a man checks a fence after hearing coyotes in the night. Every sound felt suspicious. Every shadow felt like it might be hiding a truth I hadn't seen yet. And every corner of my own home suddenly felt borrowed. Like I no longer belonged to it, and it no longer belonged to me. I started in the hallway, then the mailbox, then the kitchen counters, then finally the small desk near the front window, where I keep my bills and incoming mail sorted. It's a system I've used since '92, color-coded folders, dates, highlighted sticky notes, on top of anything time-sensitive. But that morning, the stack wasn't mine. Not the way I left it. 3 envelopes in the pile had been opened, then sealed back with the kind of sloppy, wrinkled pressure you only get from someone in a hurry, or someone whose hands are shaking with fear of getting caught. The glue edges didn't align. The corners were bent. One envelope's flap still had a smear of someone else's fingerprint in the adhesive. I checked the USPS tracking app. 2 notices, one for a statement from my investment firm, the other for an annual update from my insurance company, showed delivered. Neither one was there. I didn't misplace them. Someone removed them. I stood very still, mail in hand, listening to the quiet thrum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the thermostat. And then faintly from the kitchen, whispers. Jason's voice lower than usual. "If we can document it, it'll make the court take it seriously." Madison's reply tight, clipped like she was rehearsing lines for a play. "He forgets dates now. He lost track of the car keys twice this week. If we get a doctor's note, memory issues like that could be enough." A chair scraped softly. Then something quieter, almost conspiratorial. "Power of attorney won't be questioned if the judge already sees the pattern." A chill went through me, cold and electric. Memory issues. Doctor's note. Court. I stepped into the kitchen. And just like that silence, Jason spun around with the fakest smile a son can wear. "Morning, Dad," We didn't hear you. Madison tucked her phone under a towel, like a teenager hiding something she shouldn't be texting. She put on that gentle, overly sweet tone she reserves for charity luncheons and strangers' babies. Coffee's fresh bin. Want some? I watched the way her thumb hovered over the phone hidden under the towel. I watched Jason avoid my eyes. And I watched the distance between us stretch wide enough to swallow the entire kitchen whole. Something was happening behind my back. Something they thought I was too old or too trusting to notice. But I've seen this dance before. See, when my wife died 5 years ago, I sold the lake cabin, paid off the mortgage, and consolidated everything into a clean retirement portfolio. My house is worth about $900,000 now. Columbus housing is on fire, and with my IRA and life insurance, well, let's just say a man my age can look like a cash machine to anyone impatient enough, especially family. I took my coffee and walked away before I said something irreversible. But from that moment on, I stopped moving through my house like a homeowner and started moving like an investigator again. And investigators test their theories. The first test was simple. At lunch, I pretended to forget where I put my glasses. I even patted my pockets twice. Showmanship is everything, and asked Jason if he'd seen them. He didn't look concerned. He looked dazed. Madison didn't comfort me. She grabbed her phone so fast she almost dropped it. "So, you lost them again," she said, typing something. Again. That word slid under my skin like a knife. The second test came later, forgetting whether I'd taken my heart medication. Madison practically leapt at the chance to note it down. Then I pretended to mix up the days of the week. Another note. Another look exchanged between them. Another confirmation. I wasn't being cared for. I was being documented. They weren't building support. They were building a case. That night, I lay in bed with the ceiling fan casting slow-moving shadows across the room, and old memories came crawling in, like ghosts you didn't want to see again. I remembered the elderly taxpayers who came into the IRS office clutching letters. They didn't understand families straightened by the very children who promised to handle things for them. I remembered sitting across from men my age, broken, ashamed, whispering I should have seen it earlier. I remembered one case, Mr. Dalton, who cried in my office because his daughter took everything while he was recovering from surgery. Took his truck, his checking account, even sold his tools. I remember thinking, God help me, I will never let that happen to me. Not after everything I'd built. Not after everything my wife and I sacrificed. But lying there staring at the ceiling, I felt that same shame creeping into my own bones, the shame of fearing my own son. Was I overreacting? Was I misreading everything? Or had Jason, my boy who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard, become a man who saw my death as a financial event? I didn't sleep at all. And by 5 a.m., I knew the answer. I couldn't confront them. Not yet. Confrontation only warns the guilty that the clock is ticking. No, if there's one thing 30 years of fraud investigation taught me, it's this: never strike until you know everything. So the next morning, with the house still quiet and the sky turning pale over the cul-de-sac, I walked to the calendar, hanging near the pantry. Red marker in hand, circled the coming Saturday. That would be the day I'd begin something they wouldn't expect. Something that would reveal everything they were hiding behind those whispers and phone notes and manufactured forgetfulness. I capped the marker, stepped back, and whispered to the empty kitchen, if they want me out of the way so badly, I'll give them exactly what they want, and then I'll see what they do with it. I waited until Friday morning to drop the bomb, the kind of quiet, calculated announcement that feels harmless on the surface, but detonates beneath it. We were at the breakfast table. Jason was scrolling his phone, pretending to read emails he didn't actually have. Madison was slicing strawberries with a little too much enthusiasm. I buttered my toast, cleared my throat, and said casually, "I'm driving down to Tennessee for a couple of weeks. Got an old army buddy who's been after me to visit. Might stay with a group of vets at a cabin up in the mountains." Jason froze mid-scroll. Madison's knife stopped mid-air. For 2 seconds, the room fell dead still. Then Jason recovered with a bright, unnatural smile. "Oh, wow. That's great, Dad. Good for you, you deserve a break." He said it like a man who'd just been handed the winning lottery numbers, but had to pretend he didn't know what they meant. Madison leaned toward me, eyes shining with the kind of enthusiasm you reserve for a surprise clearance sale. "That sounds wonderful. Ben, I can help book hotels, find a good route. Maybe set up an app to track the drive. It'll make things easier." "Thanks," I said, smiling gently. "But I like doing things the old-fashioned way." And I watched them both carefully. Jason wasn't just relieved, he was energized. Madison kept tapping her phone under the table, probably texting someone the update. They wanted me gone, and now I was giving them exactly what they asked for. Packing was the easy part. In the main duffel bag, the one I let them see, hiking boots, wool socks, an old army field jacket, trail maps of the Smoky Mountains, a sleeping bag I hadn't used since 2013. But in the second pack, the one I slipped into the truck bed under a tarp, binoculars, an old digital camera with a 64 USBT, my worn leather investigation notebook, 4 blank USB drives, a prepaid flip phone, gloves, dark hat, and a flashlight. Not weapons, not traps, just the tools of a man who planned to watch more than he spoke. By 3:00 p.m., I rolled my duffel to the living room. Jason helped me lift it into the truck bed, his hands trembling slightly, with excitement he couldn't hide. Madison hugged me goodwin, her perfume too strong and too sweet. "Don't worry about anything here, Ben," she said, brushing my cheek with her lips. "We'll take care of everything. Everything." Her voice lingered in my ear long after she stepped back. I started the old Ford. Jason and Madison waved on the porch until I turned the corner out of sight. And the moment they disappeared from the mirror, I turned west instead of south. The motel sat just off the highway, paint-peeling neon sign, buzzing like it was dying of loneliness. Perfect. I walked into the office, paid cash for 3 nights, gave my real name, but no explanation, and asked the clerk to mark the room, "Do not disturb," for the entire stay. The room door screeched open like it hadn't been used in months. Inside, the wallpaper curled at the corners. The air conditioner rattled like it was chewing rocks. I set my bags down, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the stained carpet. I'd been a fraud investigator for decades. I'd chased people who hid money in places too small to imagine. But nothing, not even the worst of them, felt as dirty as sitting alone in a motel, watching my own family through a lie. I hated that it had come to this. Hated that my life felt like evidence instead of living. But I wasn't done. Not yet. At 9:12 p.m., I drove back to the neighborhood with my headlights off until the last possible moment, then coasted to a stop a block away from my house. Lights were on inside, too many lights. Activity. Movement. Shadows crossing windows. I raised the binoculars from the truck cab. Angle was bad. Reflections from the street lamp blocked the view. The windshield was too narrow, the distance too far. I muttered under my breath, annoyed. That's when I heard her. A voice behind me, dry, amused, and sharper than broken glass. "You know, if you really want to see what's going on in there, your truck's the worst place to hide." I jolted and turned. There she was, Loretta Coleman. 78 years old. African American. Been living on the corner lot since Reagan's first term. My wife used to garden with her in the summers. Loretta leaned on her cane, head wrapped in a floral scarf, eyes sparkling with the kind of mischief only older women can get away with. I climbed out of the truck. "Loretta, you scared the hell out of me," she snorted. Boy, if I can sneak up on you, then you're slipping worse than I thought. I'm not slipping, I said defensively. She hummed. Then why are you spying on your own house instead of sitting inside it? I didn't answer. She didn't need one. Loretta tilted her chin toward the vacant home across from mine, a two-story colonial with faded for sale sign leaning slightly to the right. You want a clean view, follow me. Before I could argue, she was already hobbling toward it. I caught up, whispering, Loretta, that house is locked. No, it ain't. She tapped a realtor lockbox hanging from the doorknob, pressed 4 buttons with practiced ease. Beep. Click. Miss Judy, the agent, gave me the code years ago so I could water the plants during open houses, he says. She pushed the door open. Ain't my fault she never changed it. I followed her inside, closing the door behind us. The house was empty, echoes in every room, air smelling like dust and paint primer, but Loretta moved through it like she'd lived there half her life. She led me up the stairs through a hallway into a back bedroom that faced my living room windows directly. Here, she said, pulling open the blinds. Best seat in the house. Then she surprised me again. From a tote bag slung over her shoulder, she pulled a thermos of coffee, 2 metal cups, 2 folding camp stools, and a beat-up notebook, thick with handwritten notes. She wasn't improvising. This woman had been doing her own surveillance. She set up the stools, poured the coffee, handed me a cup. Sit down, Ben. We got work to do. Work. Oh, don't pretend you don't know, she said, lowering herself into her stool with a grunt. I've been watching them, watching you for 2 weeks now. My heart thudded once hard. Loretta, what exactly have you seen? She tapped her notebook, flipping it open to a page covered in tight, sharp handwriting. You stay awake till around midnight tonight, she said, looking at me over her glasses. And you're finally gonna understand what your boy's been up to. Midnight has a way of stripping the world down to its truth. No noise, no neighbors, no excuses left to hide behind. Just light and shadow, and whatever you're brave enough to see between them. Loretta and I sat in that empty upstairs room of the vacant house, our folding stools creaking every time one of us shifted. The whole place smelled like dust-cold drywall and a little bit of mildew. But the view was perfect. My house glowed like a stage set. Every downstairs light was on. Drawers open. Shadows moving back and forth across the windows. I raised the binoculars. Jason was in my study again, my study, rifling through the file drawer I kept locked for 20 more years. He wasn't even pretending to be careful this time, just yanking folders out, piling them on the desk. Madison hovered beside him with a portable handheld scanner, one of those slim, battery-powered models accountants use on the go. Each time Jason flattened a document on the desk, Madison slid the scanner over it in one smooth motion. Scan, flip, scan, flip. They weren't searching anymore. They were harvesting. Loretta leaned toward me, whispering, Page 83. She flipped her notebook open to a date circled in red. June 27th. 2 men visited. Business suits. One had a fancy haircut, looked like he used half a bottle of gel. Drove a Lexus with Indiana plates. Stayed 57 minutes. Under that, she'd written the plate number in perfect block lettering. I stared at the description. I'd seen that haircut somewhere. No, I'd seen it tonight. Loretta. That's the man from earlier, isn't it? The one in the Lexus. She nodded. Oh, he's been coming every Tuesday or Thursday. Your boy lets him in the moment he gets to the porch. That's why I knew to watch tonight. My stomach nodded. These weren't random meetings. This was a schedule, a pattern, a business arrangement. We watched for nearly 2 hours, Jason copying files, Madison photographing entire folders when scanning took too long. Every now and then, they'd check something on their phones, whisper reposition documents. Keep going. And then, 11:40 p.m. headlights swept slowly down my street. A black SUV, top trim, chrome accents, nothing cheap. It rolled to a stop right in front of my house. I felt Loretta stiffen beside me. Told you, she whispered. The driver's door opened, and out stepped the same man from Loretta's notes. A middle-aged guy in a tailored navy suit, hair slicked with gel, carrying a leather briefcase like it contained the cure to cancer, or the blueprint to steal my entire life. He scanned the neighborhood once brief, but cautious, then walked up the steps and rang my doorbell. He didn't wait. Jason opened the door in under 3 seconds. 3 seconds, as if he'd been standing behind the door, waiting for him. I tightened my grip on the binoculars until the metal dug into my palms. The three of them moved into the dining room, right where my wife's antique oak table used to sit before Jason convinced me to update it with something more modern. Now that table was loaded with my papers. Madison brought out a navy blue folder, the good reinforced kind with brass corners, the kind lawyers like to use. On the front label were 2 neat stickers. Estate. Estate. Lawrence Bin and power of attorney. The broker, because I knew now, that's exactly what he was, opened the folder and started reviewing documents with professional ease. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. He studied my signature like he expected it to be there. And God help me, someone had forged it well. Loretta and I photographed everything, rapid shots, timestamps glowing on the tiny digital screen. She whispered the time at every major movement, writing in her notebook while I kept watch. At 11:50, Trent Harlow, she murmured, broker probably mid-40s, reviewing documents labeled estate. Trent, I asked. That's what he told Madison last time. Trent Harlow. Says he handles complicated cases. My mouth went dry. Complicated cases, elder estates, powers of attorney, mental capacity loopholes. I knew exactly the type. I'd investigated people like him for years. Then the window moment we'd been waiting for arrived. Jason cracked the front door to see Trent out. The night breeze drifted through the gap, carrying their voices straight across to us. As long as the mental capacity letter is on file, Trent said, the court won't give you any trouble, especially with the documentation you've collected. Mental capacity letter. Documentation. Court. I felt the blood drain from my face. Jason responded low, but audible. We can list the house next week, Trent. Next week. Out-of-state cash buyer already lined up. 6 figures, fast-track sale. Then Jason laughed, a sound I didn't recognize. He won't even know what hit him. He barely remembers what day it is. And Madison, God. Madison. She gave a short, cold laugh and said, by the time he figures it out, the money will be gone. I had to grip the edge of the folding stool to keep my hands from shaking. Rage crawled up my spine like fire. This was my son. My only son. The boy who used to fall asleep on my chest after baseball practice. The kid who once cried because he broke my favorite fishing rod and thought I'd be disappointed. And now he was sitting in my house, plotting to strip me of everything I owned. I felt something inside me tear, not loudly, not violently, just a quiet rip deep in the soul. The kind that doesn't heal. The kind you carry. Loretta noticed the tremor in my hand and placed hers, small, warm, steady, over mine. She didn't look at me when she spoke. She just stared across the street, eyes hard, voice low. My own daughter emptied my checking account while I was in the hospital. I turned to her slowly. She kept going. I stayed quiet. Too ashamed. Didn't want folks at church to know. Thought if I ignored it long enough, maybe she'd give something back. She paused, her jaw tightening. Biggest mistake of my life. Then she finally looked at me. And in her eyes, I saw the same pain she saw in mine. Don't you make the same one, Bin. I didn't sleep when I got back to the motel. Didn't even lie down. I just sat there in the dim yellow light of that flickering bedside lamp, replaying every photo, every angle, every overheard sentence from the night before. My hands shook not from fear, but from cold, clean fury. Watching from across the street wasn't enough anymore. Pictures weren't enough. Hearing them plot wasn't enough. I needed the documents themselves, the signatures, the drafts, the paper trail. I needed to touch the truth. For the next 3 days, the vacant house across from mine became a command center. Loretta and I watched Jason and Madison's routine like a pair of retirees casing a bank heist. Jason left for work around 8 and 10 a.m. Though we'd never confirmed where work actually was. Madison's schedule at the dental clinic started at 7:45 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They went to the gym Wednesdays at 6:30. Monday nights church group. Friday evenings, Madison's sister's place 2 hours minimum. Every time Loretta walked her dog, she did a slow loop around the block, pretending to enjoy the breeze while checking who was home, which lights were on, whether Madison's car moved. On Tuesday morning, just after sunrise, my burner phone buzzed with a text from Loretta House. Is clear. Go. Now. My heart kicked once hard. I grabbed my keys, put on an old Ohio State hoodie, and drove to my own home like I'd forgotten medication or left the stove on. Several neighbors waved. I waved back, playing the part. I walked up the steps, fit my own key into my own lock, and stepped into my home like an intruder. The air still smelled faintly of Madison's morning coffee. The sink had a cereal bowl in it. My life was still being lived, just not by me. I locked the door behind me. Then I moved fast. Down the hall. Into Jason's makeshift home office, the guest room they temporarily claimed when they moved back in. Drawers, folders, bags. And then I saw it. A navy blue folder identical to the one Madison handed Trent at midnight, shoved in the bottom drawer beneath a stack of old tax papers. My pulse pounded as I pulled it out. Inside, durable power of attorney, Lawrence Bin, dated 6 weeks ago. Signature mine. Except it wasn't. It was close. Painfully close. But the stroke on the capital B was too tight. The bend in the N was too short. The pressure pattern was wrong. The ink pooled where my hand never pools. Jason didn't forge it himself. Someone professional had done this. I took out my phone and photographed the pages one by one. Then I pulled out the portable scanner they'd been using on my documents. I almost laughed. Using their own device against them. There was a kind of poetic justice in it. But the folder held more. Much more. A partly completed petition for temporary guardianship with my name on it, and a neurologist listed as the evaluating physician. A neurologist I'd met once after my minor heart issue. They'd planned to use that brief visit to claim cognitive decline. Next, a printed email thread between Madison and Trent. Once we get him into assisted living, the listing will move faster. Broker fee is noted payment upon closing. Please advise if you need the capacity letter reworded. We expect the sale to clear before he notices anything. And then the worst part, draft, mental capacity letter, awaiting physician's signature, a pre-written document claiming I was incompetent, just waiting for a doctor's pen. My throat tightened. I kept scanning everything, hands steady, now movements automatic. When you work in fraud, as long as I have the fear, eventually gives way to precision. At the back of the drawer, tucked under a stack of Jason's resumes, I found an envelope so old and worn it almost fell apart in my hands. My wife's handwriting was on it. For Bin. If Jason ever scares you. My knees nearly buckled. Inside was a handwritten letter, blue ink, slanted cursive, the same looping strokes she had used on every birthday card she ever gave me. Bin, if you're reading this, Something's gone wrong with Jason again. You know he has a weakness for shortcuts. He doesn't think of consequences the way you do. I've seen it in him since college, that hunger for the easy way out. I pray he grows out of it, but if he doesn't, you have to protect yourself. You always choose justice even when it hurts. Promise me, you'll do the same if our son ever chooses the wrong side of life. I love you. Don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness, especially not our boy. Marie. I sat there holding that letter, feeling like she was standing beside me, her voice whispering across time, steadying me, telling me what I already knew. This wasn't just investigation anymore. This was obligation. This was a promise. I slipped her letter carefully into my jacket pocket, close to my heart, and finished collecting evidence until the folder was empty. Then I put everything back, exactly how I found it. Every paper, every pen, every drawer angle. When I finally walked into the living room, I stopped in front of the family photos lining the mantel. The three of us years ago. My wife glowing with that gentle smile. Jason Young grinning, arms wrapped around my neck. I stared at that picture a long time. Then I spoke softly into the empty house. I'm not walking away from this home. You want to steal my life? You better lawyer up. I locked the door behind me and walked back to the motel with a backpack full of evidence and the ghost of my wife walking beside me. I turned my cheap motel room into a war room. Not metaphorically, literally. By 7 a.m., every wall was covered, taped over motel wallpaper, hidden behind a grid of notes, photos, timestamps, arrows, and circles. I mapped it all out the same way I used to diagram tax fraud networks for the IRS. Jason, Madison, Trent Harlow, neurologist, family court, real estate broker, fast-track sale. Every name got a redding underlined. Every date got circled twice. Every lie got recorded. It wasn't anger that drove me. It was clarity. They stopped being family the moment they forged my name. Now they were subjects in a case. And I was the investigator. By noon I called the one man I knew would give it to me straight. Frank Bauer's former fee, now retired somewhere near Tampa, where the sun could bake his joints and the humidity could ruin his golf game. We hadn't spoken in years, but when the screen lit up with his weathered face, he squinted and said, "Jesus, Ben, you look like hell. You in trouble or just old?" I didn't smile. "Frank, they're trying to take my house. Power of attorney forgery, temporary guardianship. They've got a broker, a doctor, paperwork ready to file." He sat back, exhaled sharply. "Oh, hell. All right, listen carefully. You treat this like a case, not a family spat. Got it? You want to win. You need 4 things immediately. 1. Affidavit saying you've never signed any POA. 2. Irrevocable trust to shift the house out of reach. 3. Freeze at the bank, flag every real estate transaction. 4. A damn good elder law attorney who has zero connection to Jason. And Ben, don't confront them. Don't warn them. Don't blink." I nodded slowly. Frank leaned closer, eyes hard. "You have evidence. That's gold. But you need infrastructure. Build the fortress first, then bring the cannons." The call ended with one final line I already knew, but needed to hear: friend to friend, nail them before they nail you. The next morning, I walked into the small office of Ava Price, elder law attorney, Columbus, Ohio. 45. Sharp bob haircut. Glasses on a chain. A woman whose expression conveyed she'd already heard every family horror story in the tri-state area. She gestured for me to sit. "I'll be honest, Mr. Lewis, Ben," I corrected. "All right, Ben. 90% of older clients who come in saying their kids are plotting something. They are mistaken, misled, or missing information. So before we dive in, do you have actual proof?" I opened my briefcase. and laid out the evidence piece by piece, like I was reconstructing a crime scene. Photographs from the midnight meeting, printed emails between Madison and Trent, draft guardianship petition, mental capacity letter awaiting signature, photocopy of forged piece A with highlighted handwriting discrepancies, my wife's letter, Loretta's witness notes, audio clips of Jason saying, "I barely know what day it is." Ava's skepticism evaporated. By the third page, she wasn't blinking. By the fifth, she was cursing under her breath. By the seventh, she stood up, walked to the window and said, "Oh my God, they really are trying to railroad you." I kept my voice steady. "What do we do?" She turned back, eyes sharp, like a general outlining a counterstrike. "We build a legal fortress." For the next 3 hours, we mapped a plan that would make Frank proud. 1. Establish an irrevocable living trust. We moved the house into the trust with me as the sole trustee. Date of effect weeks before the forged POA. Ava handled the paperwork so cleanly it could slice steel. Once this is filed, she said they can't touch the house. Not with a fake POA, not with guardianship, not with anything short of divine intervention. 2. File a sworn affidavit at the county recorder's office, stating, "I have never executed a power of attorney." Document notarized on the spot. 3. Contact the bank, freeze any transaction related to my property. Mark my accounts as requiring in-person verification and a verbal code, known only to me. 4. Notify Adult Protective Services quietly. Ava dialed them herself. "This isn't reporting your son," she said. "It's building a defensive record. If they accuse you of incapacity, APS will have documentation that you're lucid and acting proactively." 5. Undergo an independent neurological evaluation. That one hurt. My pride stung at the thought of proving my sanity like some defendant in a competency hearing. But Ava was right. If Jason files for guardianship, we need a clean medical report ready to smack him in the face. I agreed. Because justice sometimes demands swallowing your pride. Meanwhile, Loretta stepped deeper into the fight. Even though her own son begged her not to get involved, "Mom, stay out of it. You're gonna stir up trouble. These people clearly have issues. They are his family," she snapped. "Issues or not, he deserves someone in his corner." Her son walked out angry. Loretta didn't chase him. She just stood in my motel doorway later that night and said, "My kid wants peace and quiet. But peace without justice is just silence. And I'm done being silent." We shared a moment there, two older people abandoned or misunderstood by the very children we raised. Two people who'd spent years giving love without expecting betrayal from the hands that received it. Now we were standing up for ourselves and for each other. By the end of the week, Ava slid the completed trust packet across her desk toward me. Thick, stamped, notarized, filed, untouchable. I held it for a second, feeling the weight of it. The protection, the power, the justice, my entire home, my memories, my wife's last years, my life's work was no longer a target. Ava folded her hands and asked, "How do you feel?" I stared at the trust, my voice low and steady. "They think I'm the old man. They can move around on a chessboard." I looked up at her, felt something sharp and new settling inside my chest. They have no idea I just flipped the whole board. I chose a Tuesday afternoon to return home early. The kind of day when the sky hangs low and heavy rain turning every window into a streaked blur. A good day for mistakes. A good day for an old man who looked tired, confused, and a little out of place. I turned my Ford into the driveway, slowly, deliberately, wipers slapping back and forth like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Jason's car was parked crooked. He always parked crooked when he was nervous, and Madison's SUV sat perfectly centered, like she wanted the whole neighborhood to know she was keeping order around here. When the front door swung open, They both appeared on the porch, faces lit with surprise. They tried and failed to hide. Jason forced a laugh. "Dad, you're back already." Madison rushed forward, clutching her cardigan tight against the rain. "Oh my gosh, Ben. Are you okay? Did something happen? Was the drive too much, your heart?" Their concern felt rehearsed like lines in a school play. I grabbed my duffel from the truck bed and made my shoulders sag a little. "Just got tired sooner than I thought," I said, letting my voice drift unfussed. "Didn't feel right staying out there so long." Jason took the bag from my hand gently, but not lovingly. More like how you hold a fragile object you don't want to break before you can sell it. "Well, we're glad you're home safe," he said. A lie so clean it almost gleamed. At dinner that night, a bland casserole Madison reheated, like she wanted it to match her personality. Jason tried testing me again. "So Dad, remember, before your trip you said you were gonna stop in Lexington first, right?" I tilted my head, pretended to think. "Lexington? No, I think I said Knoxville." "You said Lexington," he insisted too quickly. He leaned forward, watching every twitch of my face. "Remember, we talked about it in the kitchen. You planned the whole thing." I let silence linger just long enough to make him confident. Then I said, "If you say so, son," with a slow nod. Madison shot a look at him, like she was tallying points. They kept going. "Dad, do you remember where you put the spare mailbox key? Dad, what day was your doctor's appointment again? Dad, didn't you tell the neighbor you'd be back next month?" Little traps, little tests, little ways to build their forgetful old man file. I answered slowly, asked them to repeat questions, paused like the gears in my head were rusted. And in my shirt pocket, my phone recorded every word. 2 days later, after breakfast, Madison slid a brochure across the table. "Ben, I made an appointment with Dr. Riley," she said gently, like she was offering a prayer card at a funeral. "Just a simple neurological check. It'll put the court at ease if she caught herself." Too late. If the court? If what? Jason cleared his throat. "She means, just peace of mind. For everyone." I blinked twice like it was all a little much to absorb. "Oh, yeah, sure, if it helps." They both relaxed, believing they'd won another inch, while my thumb hidden under the table slid across my phone screen and switched on the recorder. Every night that week, I sat alone in my study door, closed lights off, listening to their whispered lines from the day. "Dad won't remember. He gets confused easily. He signed it before he just forgot. Just put your initials there. He won't know the difference. Don't bother explaining, just get him to sign." I saved each file, renamed them by date and time, sent a copy to Ava, sent a copy to Frank, stored another on a USB, and hid it in the motel. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Everything was becoming ammunition. Meanwhile, I went to see the independent neurologist Ava recommended. Dr. Kaplan was a small man with silver hair and a pen he clicked every 8 seconds. He ran me through the whole circus, recall 5 words, draw a clock, subtract 7 from 100, repeat a story back to him, identify shapes, memory sequencing, verbal fluency, executive reasoning tastes. Some of it was easy. Some of it made me feel like I was 90, not 60. But I passed. Not perfectly. No one my age does. But the report, typed, signed, stamped, said, "Patient is fully competent. Minor age-appropriate memory decline. No signs of dementia impairment or diminished legal capacity." Ava tucked that report into her fill like a queen sliding an ace up her sleeve. "Don't let Jason know you took this test," she warned. "It's your nuclear button." That night, walking past Jason and Madison's room, I heard their voices through the crack in the door. "Madison, he doesn't even remember we talked about that power of attorney last month." Jason, once the judge sees the letter from Dr. Riley, it's a done deal. Madison again, colder than a January window. Grow a spine. Jason, just file the petition. The sooner he's declared incompetent, the faster we can move. My breath caught in my throat. They weren't just plotting my financial death. They were rehearsing it, practicing their lines, perfecting their story, building a courtroom performance where I'd be the doddering fool, the convinced old man who signs papers and forgets them. A burden, an obstacle, a thing to be pushed aside. I stood there in the hallway, invisible, listening to my own son talk about me, like I was a broken appliance he just needed permission to throw away. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something colder, something sharper. I went to my study, opened my investigation notebook, and wrote, "They've built their story. They've practiced their lines. They're walking into court with a script. The problem for them is I wrote scripts like that for a living, and I know exactly how to tear them apart." Friday. A day they chose carefully, a day they thought they would win twice. A guardianship ruling in the morning, a house sale in the afternoon. 2 blows to end my independence and empty my life. But they forgot one thing: I was no longer the man they believed they could steer like a tired old mule. I had the truth. I had the law. And I had a plan layered tighter than any case file I built in my entire career. The summons arrived on a Wednesday. I opened the envelope at the kitchen table, held it at arm's length, and squinted like a man whose eyesight needed help. Jason hovered by the sink, pretending to wipe a clean counter. "What's this about?" I asked softly, voice trembling just enough. Jason swallowed hard. "Oh, well, Dad, it's just a formality. Nothing to worry about. The court wants to check on things, that's all. You know, for your safety." Madison chimed in, tone sugary. "It's just routine. With the memory issues and everything." I blinked slowly. Memory issues. They traded a look. Jason cleared his throat again. "It's really nothing. We'll explain it to the judge." I nodded like a man grateful for guidance. Inside, my stomach twisted with something colder than fear. Friday morning, the family courtroom felt smaller than I remembered, the kind of room where the walls listen. Jason and Madison sat at one table, dressed in somber navy and charcoal, hands folded like saints. Trent was not with them. This part required the performance of filial loyalty. I sat with Ava, who radiated the calm of a woman sharpening a blade no one else saw. The judge, a woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, looked over the file. "Petition for temporary guardianship," she read, "filed by the respondent's son and daughter-in-law." Jason stood and launched into his role. "Your Honor, my dad. He's been very confused lately, forgetting the dates of appointments, leaving mail unopened for weeks. He couldn't remember the anniversary of my mom's passing. He's mixed up basic financial tasks. He doesn't even know how to use his bank card anymore." Madison nodded vigorously. "He wanders at night, gets lost driving. We're scared he'll hurt himself. We love him. We're just trying to protect him." Protect. They used that word like a shield. The judge looked at me. I kept my expression blank, hands resting on my knees. When she turned to Ava, the storm began. "Your Honor," Ava said, standing with effortless precision, "we have multiple exhibits that contradict every statement made here today." She handed the judge a packet. First, an independent neurological evaluation conducted by Dr. Kaplan, confirming Mr. Lewis is fully competent, with only mild age-appropriate memory decline. Then she placed a small recorder on the table. Second, we have audio clips of the petitioners discussing their plan to fabricate cognitive decline for legal leverage. Jason's head snapped toward me. "What?" Ava continued, unfazed. "Third, we have documentation of a forged durable power of attorney, along with emails between Mrs. Lewis and a man named Trent Harlow, coordinating the fraudulent sale of Mr. Lewis's home. These emails explicitly reference declaring Mr. Lewis incompetent. Madison's face drained of color. And finally, Ava said, voice steady as stone, "We have evidence that Riley's so-called mental capacity letter was drafted based solely on the petitioner's statements, with no medical evaluation performed whatsoever." The judge's pen stopped moving. Silence expanded thick and electric. Jason stammered, This is taken out of context. Dad is confused." The judge raised a hand. "Enough." She turned to me. "Ortiz, Lewis, do you wish to remain autonomous in managing your own affairs?" I met her gaze. "Yes, Your Honor." Fully. Her ruling was immediate. Petition denied. And based on the evidence presented, I am forwarding this case to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential elder fraud, coercion, and perjury. Jason sagged like a puppet with cut strings. Madison whispered, "Oh my God," through frozen lips. I didn't look at them. Not yet. The moment we stepped out of the courtroom, Ava grabbed her briefcase. "We're not done," she said. "Title office, now." We drove straight across town to the title company, a clean glass building with a lobby too bright for the kind of business that was about to unfold inside it. In a conference room, Trent Harlow stood with a fancy leather folder. Beside him was a well-dressed cash buyer in a tailored suit. A young escrow officer shuffled papers nervously. Jason and Madison were already there, believing I was still getting evaluated in court. When I walked in, Jason's face lost its shape. "Dad, what are you?" I stepped forward, voice firm, clear, louder than I'd spoken in case. "My name is Ben Lewis. I am the legal and competent owner of the property at 214 Clayhurst Drive, and no sale will take place today, or ever." The room froze. Ava placed the trust documents, affidavit, and exhibits on the table, like a dealer laying out a royal flush. "This house is in an irrevocable trust," she said. "This affidavit rejects all prior POA documents. The attempted guardianship was dismissed due to evidence of fraud. And this," she lifted the forged POA, "is a felony." The cash buyer shot up from his chair. "Is this a joke? I wired the earnest money this morning." The escrow officer's eyes widened. "Excuse me, I need to pause this transaction immediately." Jason sputtered, "Dad, listen, this is all just..." But Ava wasn't done. "Mr. Harlow," she said, turning to Trent, "as of now, you are implicated in potential mortgage fraud under both Ohio state law and federal statute. Elder exploitation is a serious charge. You may want to stop speaking altogether." Trent blanched. I only processed the documents they gave me. Documents you knew were irregular," Ava replied. "Your emails confirm that." The door opened. 2 officers stepped in, calm, steady, efficient. "Jason Lewis, Madison Lewis." "Trent Harlow," Jason whispered. No, this isn't Dad. Dad did say something, but I didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't soften. My heart tightened like a fist in my chest as the cuffs clicked shut around my son's wrists. I thought of him at age 8. I thought of him at age 19. I thought of him last night, plotting to erase my life. And still I wanted to look away. But I didn't. Because if I looked away now, I'd lose everything I fought to protect. As they led them out, the cash buyer cursed under his breath. The escrow officer dialed her supervisor, and Trent sagged like a man realizing the world he built just collapsed. Ava placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Ben. Maybe not." But as I watched the officers guide Jason through the doorway, my son, my blood, my breath caught in my throat. And in the quiet, I heard my own voice echo inside me, I'd spent my whole career watching other men's sons get led out of courtrooms in cuffs. I never thought I'd live long enough to watch it happen to my own. The storm didn't end at the title office. It only changed shape from whispered conspiracies in my kitchen to recorded interviews, subpoenas, and sealed evidence bags. By Monday morning, the case had moved out of my life and straight into the hands of the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. And that's when everything blew open. Ava met me in her office at 10 a.m., closing the door with the gravity of someone about to deliver a verdict. "Ben," she said quietly, "there's someone else." She slid a printed email across the table. The name at the top hit me like a cold splash. Kyle Mercer, Senior Financial Strategist, Meridian Horizon Advisory. Except there was nothing senior or strategic about him. Kyle was a predator, a man whose entire business model was manipulating the elderly through forged POAs, fast-track guardianships, and quick-sell home flips. Ava continued tapping the email. "He's the one who pulled Jason in. Trent brought Madison on board. They've done this before. Multiple times. You were just next." I stared at Kyle's smug corporate headshot in the attached file. The kind of man who wore expensive watches he didn't pay for. Ava sighed. Jason met him at the gym. Kyle saw him struggling, credit cards, maxed out late student loan payments, and pitched him a financial shortcut. A shortcut that involved you. The knot in my stomach tightened. "Jason agreed," I whispered. She nodded. Yes. He wasn't forced. He wasn't tricked. Just weak. 2 days later, the prosecutor allowed Ava to share summaries of Jason's and Madison's recorded interviews. I sat across from Ava in her office as she read the lines aloud. Jason's voice shaky, defeated. "Kyle said it was legal. Said Dad wouldn't notice. Said old people always lose track eventually." Then the line that cleaved me straight down the spine. "I just didn't want to wait until he died. I'm tired of barely scraping by." I closed my eyes. I had heard people say monstrous things in interrogation rooms, but hearing it from my own son's mouth was a different kind of wound. A quieter, more deliberate kind. Ava hesitated before reading the next part. Madison's interview. Her tone was different. Cold-clipped, controlled. Jason hesitated. I didn't. "Kyle said we could finish the process in 6 weeks if we pushed hard. We needed a mental capacity letter, then guardianship, then power of attorney, then the sale." I agreed. He agreed. No one forced us. Then another dagger: "When the house sells, Jason gets his half. I get mine." Then a leaf. I felt something hollow out in me, not because of Madison's betrayal, but because Jason had built a life with someone who saw him as disposable. Weakness attracts wolves. That afternoon I walked across the street to see Loretta. Her porch light was on, though it was broad daylight. She opened the door with her shoulders slumped and eyes red-rimmed. "My son's furious," she muttered, waving me inside. "He says I stuck my nose where it didn't belong. Said if I pull something like this again, he'll put me in a home so I don't cause trouble." The shame in her voice nearly broke me. "I'm sorry he said that," I whispered. Loretta shook her head. "He's not a bad man, just tired of being responsible for an old woman. That's how the world sees us, Ben. The older we get, the easier it is for people to forget we're still people." I sat beside her on the worn couch and placed a hand on her shoulder. "If anything happens, legal trouble, financial trouble, you call me. I mean it. You're not alone in this." Her eyes glistened, and she squeezed my hand. Two old warriors in a world that had learned to shove its elders into the shadows. By the end of the week, the prosecutor had made the call. Kyle Mercer, charged with financial exploitation, wire fraud, conspiracy, and POA forgery. Trent Harlow, charged with aiding fraud, falsifying real estate documents, and elder abuse. Madison Lewis, charged with conspiracy and attempted financial exploitation. Jason Lewis, charged with attempted exploitation, but offered reduced sentencing if he cooperated fully, and testified against Kyle and Trent. Ava looked at me carefully. "You'll need to sign this bin," she said gently. "It confirms you approve the plea deal." I read the papers slowly. Jason's charges would be lighter. He would avoid prison, mandatory financial counseling, probation, restitution, justice, not vengeance. That was the difference between us. My throat tightened as I signed. "I'm not asking for the maximum," I murmured. "He made terrible choices, but he isn't beyond redemption." "Not yet." Ava nodded. "That's generous. More than he deserves." "Maybe. But mercy was a kind of strength, too." Before leaving Ava's office, she handed me one more document. A no-contact order. "Do you want this to be permanent?" Ava asked. "We can file a lifetime protection order if you prefer." My hand hovered over the line, where a signature would make the separation final, forever final. I imagined Jason standing on my porch one day, older, maybe wiser, maybe sober, maybe changed, trying to say words he couldn't form today. I imagined myself telling him he wasn't allowed to even knock. I set the pen down. "Make it 5 years," I said quietly. Ava blinked, surprised. 5, yes. 5. I exhaled. "If he ever wants to come stand on my porch like a man and apologize, I won't let the law be the reason he can't." Ava nodded slowly. "That's remarkably humane." I wasn't sure it was humane. Maybe it was just human. Outside, the wind carried the scent of early autumn, cool, sharp, honest. Justice had begun its work. Consequences were unfolding. And somewhere inside the courthouse walls, 3 people were learning what it costs to turn family into prey. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, grounded, alive, and maybe for the first time in months, free. The courtroom was colder than usual that morning, not in temperature, in atmosphere. It felt like the kind of cold that settles into your bones when you're about to hear something that will change the shape of your life, whether you want it to or not. I sat in the second row with Ava on one side and Loretta on the other, her hand resting firmly on my forearm, like a mother, keeping her child steady during a storm. Judge Farrow entered, glasses low on her nose, the kind of judge who didn't need to raise her voice, because every silence she created did the work for her. The bailiff called the case, and the sentencing began. Kyle Mercer stood first. Perfect hair, perfect suit, perfectly ruined life. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. The judge read the charges: wire, fraud, exploitation of an elderly person, conspiracy, forgery, attempted real estate theft. "Please, Mercer," she said, "your predatory pattern is unmistakable. You targeted vulnerable seniors for financial gain. Today, that ends." She sentenced him to 6 years in state prison. No appeal bond. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Then Trent Harlow, arms crossed, jaw tight, still thinking he was too smart to go down. He wasn't. 3 years, the judge said plainly. 18 months must be served. You aided a scheme that could have destroyed a man's life. Trent glanced at me. I didn't give him anything back, not anger, not satisfaction, nothing. He wasn't worth the energy. Then came Jason and Madison. Their charges were lower, but their shame was heavier. Jason's eyes were red, jaw shaking. Madison tried to hold his hand, but he didn't take it. Good. He needed to stand on his own 2 feet for once. Judge Farrow's voice softened, but did not bend. You both knowingly exploited a man who trusted you. That is not just illegal, it is immoral. She sentenced them to 5 years probation each. Mandatory community service, 400 hours at senior centers, $25,000 in fines, full restitution of all legal and investigative costs, mandatory financial ethics counseling. They would not serve jail time because I had agreed not to pursue maximum penalties, but they would carry the weight of their choices for a very long time. The hammer of the gavel struck once. It was done. "Mr. Lawrence," the judge said, "do you wish to speak?" I stood. My knees ached. My heart did too. But my voice was steady. "I'm 60 years old," I began. "I lost my wife, and I thought the hardest part of my life was learning how to live without her. Turns out I was wrong. I looked at Jason only once. My own son tried to turn me into a piece of paperwork, something to be managed, filed away, disposed of." Silence spread across the courtroom like a long shadow. I had to pretend I was losing my mind just to protect myself in my own home. There is no humiliation quite like that. A few people looked down at their laps. But I didn't come here for revenge. I came here so every person sitting in this room and every person who will read this transcript understand one thing: being elderly does not mean being an easy target. We may slow down, but we are not livestock for anyone to harvest. I closed the paper in my hands. I stood up for myself because my wife once asked me to choose justice if our son ever chose the wrong road. Today I honored her. When I sat back down, Loretta quietly slid a tissue into my hand. I didn't cry, but I could have. Outside the courthouse, sunlight hit the stone steps hard, bright, and indifferent to the brokenness of families. Iva stood to my right, Loretta to my left, my unlikely army. While we talked, Jason came out under supervision. His eyes were glassy, his posture slumped. For a moment, he looked at me, like the little boy who used to crawl onto my lap to have me check his math homework. He opened his mouth, but the probation officer touched his arm. "No contact allowed, Jason. Keep moving." He nodded, swallowed, and walked past me. I didn't call after him, but I did give a small nod, a gesture that meant, "I see you. I'm still here." 5 years is a long time. Maybe one day we'll talk, but not today. Today was for survival, not healing. Months passed. Autumn settled over Ohio with crisp leaves and early sunlets, and life found a strange new rhythm. I started volunteering twice a week at the senior center, not as a victim, as an educator. The flyer read, "Protecting yourself from your kids' bad decisions." Workshop hosted by Ben Lawrence, former IRS fraud investigator, certified old guy who's seen too much. It made people laugh. That mattered more than I expected. I talked about POA scams, guardianship abuse, how to notarize documents properly, what red flags to look for. I made it funny when I could, honest when I had to, hopeful when it mattered. Loretta joined me. We formed a little watchdog club, helping seniors read loan paperwork, review insurance letters, verify mysterious new friends who suddenly cared about their finances. Helping others didn't erase what happened, but it alchemized it, turned pain into purpose, turned shame into service. And that was enough. One evening late fall, I sat on my front porch with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the neighborhood kids kick a soccer ball across the cul-de-sac. The sky was bruised purple, the kind my wife used to say was God's way of reminding us to slow down. I looked at the house, my house, the one I nearly lost. I thought about her letter, the warning she'd written years before her death, begging me to choose justice if our boy ever lost his way. I had kept that promise. I whispered into the quiet, "I did right by you." The wind rustled the maple leaves like a gentle answer. As for Jason, well, redemption is a road he'll have to walk barefoot. I can't do it for him. I can only leave the door unlocked 5 years from now for whatever man he decides to become. Maybe I lost a son. Maybe I'll get him back. Time will decide. But one thing I know for certain, I kept myself, my dignity, my home, my voice. And at 60 years old, that's the real inheritance worth fighting for. If you're over 50, go check your paperwork, your deeds, your POAs, your beneficiaries. Ask questions. Ask twice. Speak up. You're not being difficult. You're protecting the life you built with your own two hands. And that's not paranoia. That's wisdom earned the hard way. Before you go, if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own strength, your own worth, your own right to be treated with dignity, then I'd be grateful if you'd like this video. And if you're someone walking through a hard chapter, or you know an older parent or neighbor who might need a voice like this, hit subscribe. It helps these stories find the people who need them. And tell me in the comments, what's your name? And where are you listening from? I read every single one. Because stories like these, they're not just mine. They belong to all of us trying to hold on to what truly matters. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself. And take care of those who once took care of you.